Hello everyone, welcome to Postcard Buddhism, the best channel for sharing knowledge about Buddhism. Today, we will talk about the topic of using right effort in our spiritual practice. Right effort is a key component of the Noble Eightfold Path, involving the prevention and overcoming of unwholesome states, as well as the cultivation and maintenance of wholesome states. By applying mindfulness and effort, we can develop positive mental habits, reduce suffering, and move towards enlightenment. Join us as we explore practical methods to integrate these teachings into our daily lives and enhance our spiritual journey. The Buddha taught the practice of making wise choices. We make choices between good and evil in every moment of our lives. We are not helpless victims, bound by fate. We are not puppets controlled by some forces, nor are the events in our lives predestined. At this very moment, we choose our actions, and in the next moment, we must bear the consequences of those choices, along with any remaining effects of past choices. A wise choice in this moment creates a favorable spiritual environment for joy in the next moment. If the choices in the previous moments were pure and virtuous, the current moment will be as well. With billions of such pure moments, we will experience joy. Developing noble spiritual habits, moment by moment, will accumulate into longer periods of joy. Our lives are built from these tiny choices, billions of them occurring in every moment. However, these subtleties of the mind are not where we begin our practice. We must start where we can see clearly through our external actions. First, keep the 5 precepts and refrain from actions that harm spiritual progress. Once the mind is no longer disturbed by unwholesome influences, we can easily observe what is happening within it. Then we can leisurely observe our stream of thoughts. Later, as we train to see how the mind moves, we can observe moments of the mind arising, peaking, and then fading away. However, in the beginning, just being mindful of the general tendencies of our thoughts as they arise is sufficient. With this awareness, we can use right effort to create new choices. The Buddha advised us all to replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome ones and cultivate wholesome thoughts in every moment until unwholesome thoughts no longer arise. According to the Buddha, we achieve this by constantly urging ourselves to be ardent, generate energy, and awaken the mind. In the 6th step of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort, the Buddha specifically explained how to direct our efforts, dividing the process into 4 parts. First, with determination and strong energy, we do whatever we can to prevent the arising of unwholesome thoughts such as anger, jealousy, or greed. However, because we are not enlightened, some negative thoughts will still slip in, no matter how hard we try. Then, we make a second effort, urging ourselves to subdue any unwholesome thoughts that have arisen. Third, we replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome thoughts, such as loving, generous thoughts or feelings of compassion. Finally, we arouse diligence to deeply cultivate wholesome thoughts. The more diligent we are, the more naturally our mind will become pure, less afflicted, and we will feel more peaceful and free. Accomplishing anything requires effort. This is true for ordinary activities like painting a house or running a business. Spiritual life requires even more diligent effort. At every step of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort is inherently present. When we practice the Buddha's teachings on the 4 types of efforts, making the mind wholly good, pure, and insightful, we achieve right view on the path. When we apply these 4 efforts to our thoughts, speech, and actions, we achieve results in right intention, right speech, and right action. When we apply these 4 efforts to ethical conduct in our work, we achieve right livelihood. Finally, when we diligently practice meditation, we achieve right mindfulness and right concentration. We can accurately conclude that right effort is the essential energy driving our success at each step of the Noble Eightfold Path. In truth, having strong effort to self-regulate is already winning half the battle. Without this strong effort to attain a wholly good state of mind, we would struggle to progress far on the path to ultimate happiness. We might want to believe that mere attention will suffice to complete the path. Certainly, attention sounds easier than strenuous effort. Unfortunately, mere simple attention is not enough. We need to cultivate mindful attention, both during meditation and other spiritual practices, and in our daily activities. The Buddha knew we needed diligent, mindful effort to eliminate negative thoughts and cultivate positive ones in every aspect of life. Otherwise, our mind would never be calm enough to progress further on the path. At this point, you might think, I know it's not easy. Why does it sound so difficult? Of course, you are right. Letting negative thoughts reside in our consciousness is certainly easier than letting them go. Greed, anger, delusion, laziness, arrogance, pride, bitterness, stubbornness, fear might have become daily habits. We don't want to make the effort to let them go. However, we still want to feel peaceful, free, and achieve our spiritual goals. Right effort is the perseverance that makes the journey on the path feasible. It is the courage to say, I must let go of negative habits of thought and action right now. It is the wisdom to see that cultivating positive, wholesome thoughts, speech, and actions is the only hope to attain joy and happiness. The 10 fetters, understanding and overcoming mental habits that bind us. To let go of the unwholesome mental habits, we need to recognize them. Generally, what we want to eradicate are any mental factors that prevent the mind from being free and at ease. Just as if we were weeding a garden, we need to distinguish between the weeds and the flowers. The same applies to the mind. Initially, we might find the mental garden full of weeds. We identify and remove unwholesome mental factors, such as anger, and replace them with wholesome, beneficial mental factors, like loving kindness. If we take some time to think about this issue, we can list various types of spiritual weeds. We know that when we are in a state of anger, hatred, jealousy, or desire, we cannot simultaneously feel happiness. Beneath these negative mental states, no matter how they manifest externally, they all stem from fundamental roots: greed, hatred, the other side of greed, and delusion or ignorance. Greed, along with ignorance, is the root of all kinds of spiritual weeds. Greed manifests in the 10 deep, powerful mental defilements called fetters. These fetters distort our views and influence our thinking, much like how a channel influences the flow of water. The fetters often bring us suffering. It is not a difficult childhood or a painful past that creates the fetters, but they have followed us from many past lives. They are the cause of each life's existence and the suffering in that life. The presence of the fetters ensures that we will be reborn many times and prevents us from achieving enlightenment. This life is also created by the fetters. We often list the 10 fetters to reflect the stages at which they must be overcome on the path to enlightenment. Fetters to be overcome to attain the first stage of enlightenment: belief in a permanent self or soul, self-view; doubt about the Buddhist teachings, skepticism; attachment to rules and rituals, clinging to rites and rituals. Fetters to be overcome to attain the second and third stages of enlightenment: sensual desire, sensual craving, ill will, hatred. Fetters to be overcome to attain the fourth stage of enlightenment: subtle desire for existence in the form realm, desire for fine material existence; subtle desire for existence in the formless realm, desire for immaterial existence; conceit, pride or the latent perception of self; restlessness, agitation, ignorance. The mind of an unenlightened person is always full of these fetters, at least in a dormant state. Occasionally, one of these fetters will arise in the mind, causing us to have a distorted view of reality and to suffer. Each moment of consciousness contains at least the subtle fetters of sensual craving and ignorance, but the other fetters sometimes accompany them. As our spiritual practice progresses, we can weaken these fetters, eventually overcoming and destroying them at each stage of meditation. After each stage, we reach a higher level of enlightenment. When the first 3 fetters are overcome, the practitioner attains the first stage of enlightenment, stream entry. Weakening the next 2 fetters leads to the second stage, once returner. However, the subtle remnants of sensual craving and ill will are more refined than what has been eradicated. When the practitioner finally overcomes these remnants, they reach the third stage, non-returner. The final 5 fetters are very subtle. When they are eradicated, the practitioner attains the fourth and final stage of enlightenment, arahantship. Self-view, Sakaya Ditti. The first fetter, self-view, is the belief in a permanent self or soul. This belief can manifest in various ways, such as thinking that the aggregates of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are the same as the self or soul, or that they belong to the self or soul. It can also involve the belief that the self or soul creates the aggregates, or that the aggregates create the self or soul. Finally, this fetter can manifest in the belief that the self or soul is separate from the aggregates and not related to them at all. Most commonly, this fetter manifests as the belief that we have a soul that existed in a previous life, that it has come into this life, possesses the aggregates, and will leave this body to go to another existence after we die. In summary, this belief is based on the notion of an eternal, unchanging, and indestructible soul. Skepticism. The second fetter, skepticism, specifically refers to doubts that practicing morality, concentration, and wisdom, according to the Buddhist teachings, will bring lasting happiness. Skepticism arises when we stray from what we truly know in the present moment and foolishly ponder issues that tend to provoke doubt. Some questions are famously known for their potential to stir up and reinforce skepticism, such as speculative questions about how the universe came to be, why it exists, and similar issues. Certain topics that provoke doubt include questions about the past and future. Did I exist in the past or did I not? What were my past lives like? Is there life after death? Will I be annihilated? Is there heaven or hell? Will I be reborn? What will the new life be like? The present can also bring us many doubts. Do I exist or do I not exist? Am I normal? Who am I? Where did I come from? Similar thoughts often arise in the mind, causing us to doubt. By myself, do I perceive that I have a self or not? Does myself speak, feel, and enjoy the results of good or bad actions? Is myself eternal, unchanging, and everlasting? All these questions and thoughts often lead us into deep, dark paths of doubt and confusion. Dwelling on them prevents us from being mindful of what is truly important. Such questions can never be satisfactorily answered and only distract us. But until we attain the first stage of enlightenment, they will continue to linger in our minds. The Buddha advised us to simply observe these questions when they arise and fade away. Do not worry or chase after them. Instead, continue making efforts based on what we can know through personal experience, not just logic. Have faith in the path to happiness taught by Buddhism, as many have followed it and attained enlightenment. Faith, in Buddhist terms, means trust based on what we have witnessed and what we think is true based on that experience. For example, we can observe that whenever our minds are full of unwholesome mental factors, we feel unhappy. Conversely, when our minds are full of wholesome mental factors, we feel happy. When all these mental factors change, we realize their impermanent nature. This is the truth. We can believe in it. This faith helps us move forward until we attain a deep understanding of the truth that leaves no room for the fetter of doubt. Clinging to rites and rituals, Silabbataparmasa. The third fetter is an instinctive mental tendency to seek external sources of support rather than internal purification. This manifests as the belief in the efficacy of rules and rituals to bring about enlightenment. As a result, we think that ultimate happiness can be achieved by performing rituals, participating in ceremonies, setting up offerings, making offerings to the Buddha or deities, reciting scriptures, praying, and chanting, rather than meditating and applying the Buddha's teachings to daily life. This attachment wastes time and hinders our ability to perceive the truth, thereby slowing our progress on the spiritual path. Sensual craving, Kama-raga. The fetter of sensual craving is the desire for sensual pleasures. It includes the desire for any pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations, as well as the body itself. It also includes all the thoughts, ideas, concepts, and opinions that we find pleasing. Will-patigga. The fetter of ill will is the dislike or aversion to anything unpleasant or anything we do not like. Desire for existence. The subtle desire to exist in the form realm or the formless realm. Pride and the fetters of restlessness and ignorance are the most subtle forms of sensual craving. These 5 fetters constitute the final obstacles to complete enlightenment. The subtle desire to exist in the form realm or the formless realm refers to the wish to live, to exist in some form or another. The desire to exist in this physical body disappears when we eliminate coarse sensual craving. However, the desire to exist in a more refined, transcendent form remains, such as the wish to exist in divine bodies. People consider these to be the forms of higher deities. Even without a body, we still desire to exist. People believe this is the future existence of those who have attained the highest meditative states. They have become the highest deities. Pride, mana. The fetter of pride refers to the characteristic of seeing oneself as an entity. This fetter is the moment-to-moment perception of I that gives rise to many misunderstandings and confusion. The mind always thinks I, without understanding that the perception of I is also just an impermanent and selfless mental state in the process of thinking. For example, the mind might say, I hear a sound, but with wisdom, it understands that only sound exists. Restlessness, udhaka. The fetter of restlessness, agitation, and worry is very subtle, unlike the hindrance with the same name. Worry is the restless state of mind caused by the most subtle defilements remaining in the mind. Worry leads to agitation, preventing the mind from settling on anything. The fetter of restlessness causes the mind to flutter like a flag in the wind, preventing it from stopping to recognize the truth of its impermanent nature. The mind seems always worried about not existing. This fetter will never completely disappear until the practitioner attains full enlightenment. Ignorance, avijja. The fetter of ignorance refers to the persistent blindness to the nature of suffering, the origin of suffering, the possibility of ending suffering, and the way to end suffering. In other words, it is ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. These 10 fetters are unimaginably powerful. When we perceive their presence, they boil like a pot of water, requiring much effort to cool down. Why are they called fetters? Because they are like iron chains that bind us to suffering in this life and to endless cycles of rebirth in the future. The function of these chains is very subtle and tricky, but with a mindful mind we can know how they operate. Let's examine the fourth fetter, sensual craving. We know we have sense faculties, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. We also know these faculties interact with the external world. Because of the constant interaction between the faculties and the objects, sensual pleasures can arise, and the desire to enjoy these pleasures arises within us. With mindfulness, we can recognize the arising of desire. If for some reason desire does not arise, we can also recognize the absence of desire. Desire makes us want this or that, like this moment or that person, love this person or that environment, scenery, sound, smell, taste, touch, or thought. Because of all these likes or dislikes, our mind either clings to or rejects them. More importantly, they make us cling to life, attach to it, or despise it. Thus, the desire for sensual pleasures strengthens the chains that bind us to the endless cycle of rebirth. Any fetter can arise when there is contact. Consider the fetter of self-view. When there is contact, a feeling arises that can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. At that moment, the consciousness of a permanent self arises. It is the I that causes the self to feel. And this I exists in the self as something permanent, unchanging, and solid. The fetter of self-view binds us to seeking pleasant objects and resisting unpleasant ones. I am not happy. I cannot only contact pleasant objects as I want. The world surrounds us, and not all of it is pleasant. However, if we can truly see that a feeling is impermanent, if we can be aware of its arising and passing away, we will not cling to it. We will move on. If we can perceive that the nature of things is impermanent, to let go when they pass away, then our mind will be free from the stress of always seeking pleasant objects. If we can maintain mindfulness of all arising phenomena, knowing that they will pass away, the fetter of self-view will not be present. Let's consider another fetter, clinging to rites and rituals. Perhaps you have a ritual of lighting a candle and praying every morning to be free from suffering. Every morning you think, I must perform my ritual. But you do not try to reduce mental defilements by cultivating wisdom, meditation, or wholesome qualities like loving kindness. Instead, you cling to the belief that performing this ritual every morning will surely bring happiness. Doing so for many years, even if you never miss a day of the ritual, you will not be any closer to enlightenment. When observing the mind with mindfulness, we can see the fetters arise when the senses contact the external world. Until we attain enlightenment, each time one of the 6 senses contacts its object, the fetters will arise. Mindfulness can help us distinguish between the senses, their objects, and the fetters when they arise. When the fetters appear, we need to use mindful effort to subdue them. When they fade away, we need to be mindful of that state, And when they are absent, we need to recognize that state as well. The 5 hindrances, obstacles to meditation and positive actions. From the 10 fetters arise several extremely unwholesome mental states that hinder our progress in meditation and in doing good deeds in life. These mental states are called hindrances, nivarana. If the fetters are like a gentle breeze, the hindrances are like a storm. Hindrances truly pose challenges for novice meditators. The 5 hindrances are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse and doubt. They arise from the fetters under certain conditions, flaring up like flames from smoldering embers. However, like flames, hindrances can be extinguished with right effort when applied correctly. Hindrances can be subdued by meditation or persistent mindfulness. Mindfulness or concentration can cool down the hindrances and subdue them when they arise. When the mind is free from any hindrances, it automatically becomes clear and pure. This clarity of mind makes it easier to develop wholesome mental states, leading to meditation and the ability to clearly recognize the impermanent nature of all phenomena. Any of us can eliminate these hindrances, at least temporarily. As long as the 10 fundamental fetters exist, the hindrances can return to disturb the mind at some point. However, with the practice of the 4 right efforts, we can reduce and shorten their occurrences. As we become more skilled in applying right effort, the hindrances cannot cause much trouble in our meditation or daily life. Sensual desire. The hindrance of sensual desire is the craving for possession. During meditation, this hindrance appears as desires for food or material objects we want to own, or sexual desire. These thoughts consume a lot of our meditation time, and if we get caught up in them, they can become a hard-to-break habit. The trap of sensual desire is not unlike the method used to catch monkeys in some countries. The trapper cuts a small hole at the top of a coconut and drains the coconut water. Then he cuts some coconut meat and places it at the bottom of the coconut, tying the coconut securely to a tree. The monkeys, as the prey, will reach their hand through the small hole at the top of the coconut to grab the pieces of coconut meat. However, a handful of coconut meat cannot pass through the small hole. When the trapper returns, he easily captures the greedy monkey, too attached to the coconut pieces in its hand to let them go and escape. We feel pity for the monkey, but all of us have fallen into the trap of desire in similar ways. Well, the hindrance of ill will includes hatred, anger, and resentment, all stemming from the desire to avoid what we dislike. Ill will is compared to boiling water. When water is boiling, we cannot see the bottom of the pot, and if we touch it, we get burned. Similarly, anger burns us rather than the person who made us angry, and it is hard to find the real cause, seeing the bottom of the pot, of the hot feeling when anger is boiling inside us. Due to anger, our judgment becomes distorted, and our peace of mind is destroyed. It is like a disease that makes even delicious food tasteless, preventing us from enjoying it. Likewise, when our mind is full of hatred, we cannot appreciate the good qualities of the people around us. Sloth and torpor. While meditating, practitioners often struggle with desire and anger. Once these hindrances are subdued and the practitioner enjoys a few moments of peace, they might then feel sluggish and sleepy, torpor and sloth. This hindrance arises from the fetter of ignorance. Torpor is a state of mental dullness, while sloth is a state of physical lethargy and sleepiness. When feeling sluggish and sleepy, we cannot focus or accomplish anything, nor can we practice mindfulness or meditate. This hindrance is compared to being imprisoned. When imprisoned, we cannot know what is happening in the outside world. Similarly, when our body and mind are sluggish and sleepy, we do not know what is happening around us or within us. Restlessness and remorse. Restlessness prevents us from being at peace, so these two mental states often go hand in hand. Both restlessness and remorse prevent clear thinking and understanding. This hindrance is compared to being enslaved. A slave works hard to serve a cruel master, constantly worrying and feeling tense for fear of punishment. The more tense and restless they are, the more they suffer. They never enjoy peace of mind. Doubt. The hindrance of doubt makes practitioners confused, unsure of which direction or path to follow. Doubt arises from thinking about matters other than what we can observe happening in the present moment. Doubt is compared to a person lost in a desert without a map or sense of direction. In the desert, it is easy to get disoriented because it is hard to distinguish landmarks. Any direction could be wrong or right. Similarly, when we doubt the truth of the Buddha's teachings, we become confused and unable to make clear decisions. The person might think, can people really become enlightened? Is this practice truly helpful? Am I practicing correctly? Others seem to practice better. Maybe I should do something different, or seek another teacher, or explore something entirely different. These doubts sap our enthusiasm, causing confusion and preventing us from making clear judgments. The 4 right efforts. Now we can examine how to deal with the weeds of hindrances and fetters in the mind to cultivate more positive mental states. The Buddha taught us a method to train the mind in this way. We need to apply right effort to prevent negative mental states, overcome negative mental states, cultivate positive mental states, maintain positive mental states, preventing negative mental states. The first line of defense is to prevent negative mental states or unwholesome factors from arising. How? By maintaining continuous mindfulness. That's it. Mindfulness requires practice, and practice requires effort. There are 5 points in training the mind for mindfulness: virtue, mindfulness, wisdom, patience, and effort. Effort is applied to each of these points. We begin with virtue, good ethics, which requires effort, as discussed in previous chapters about the steps in the Noble Eightfold Path. With a solid foundation of virtue, we must make an effort to practice any form of mindfulness we can remember. One aspect of mindfulness is remembering, which must be maintained at all times. Again and again, we need to remember to bring our mind to the present moment. Gradually, we will accumulate many moments of mindfulness. No moment of mindfulness is ever wasted. Next, we use our understanding, bringing deeper insight into our efforts. We pause and think, how did this issue arise last time? Feeling the consequences of past mistakes gives us more motivation to avoid them in the future. Reflect on our experiences to avoid repeating those mistakes. In this way, we quickly correct our behavior. When we can see reality more deeply, we will always remind ourselves of our immediate goals and not let a single moment pass without mindfulness and clarity. If we fail, we use patience, accepting the consequences and then persistently re-establishing mindfulness. Developing a firm mindfulness practice can be a long process, so the Buddha provided us with ways to protect the mind. The Buddha advised us to practice wise attention and avoid unwise attention. M2. He taught that we need to stay grounded in what we know is true through the 5 aggregates right now. That is our domain, our true home. Thought can lead us far from that safe place. For example, during meditation, if we hear a noise, simply recognize it as a sound, rather than wondering who made the noise and what it means. When working, if we feel cold, simply observe the sensation without thinking or having opinions about the building's heating system. View our train of thoughts like buses passing by a bus stop. Don't get on the bus, just let it pass. The Buddha advised his disciples to endure minor inconveniences in life without immediately trying to change them. If we always want to change everything to our liking, the mind will always be agitated, making it easy for unwholesome states to arise. For example, if you find the meditation hall too hot, instead of getting up to adjust the thermostat or open a window, simply be aware of the heat. Observe the physical changes outside and the changing reactions of the mind. Train yourself to endure minor discomforts. However, some people follow this advice rigidly. Of course, in emergencies, we must act immediately and mindfully. The Buddha also advised us to avoid foolish, unmindful, and foolish people because we often have a tendency to mimic others. Associate with those who have qualities you want to learn. Find a good friend with uprightness, discipline, self-restraint, mindfulness, and moderate behavior. Stay close and seek advice from this person when needed. The Buddha also reminded his disciples not to pay attention to the signs and features of any external influences that might cause unwholesome states to arise. Signs refer to the traps, the things that catch our eye and make us want to examine them closely, stirring up unwholesome states. Features refer to the specific characteristics of the object of our attention that can stir up unwholesome states. For example, a married man might be advised not to pay attention to or be captivated by the seductive actions or particularly attractive features of a woman he could become infatuated with. Similarly, a married woman might be advised not to notice whether a handsome man in front of her is wearing a ring or to linger on his smile. A story from the Buddha's time can better illustrate this. A monk whose vow of celibacy was threatened by sexual obsessions contemplated the body as a skeleton to free himself from those thoughts. One day he walked down a path through a forest. A beautiful woman, walking the same path in the opposite direction, smiled at him as she returned to her parents' home after arguing with her husband. Later, the husband, on his way to find his wife, met the monk and asked, "Venerable sir, did you see a young, beautiful woman pass by this way?" "I do not know if it was a man or a woman," the monk replied, "but I did see a skeleton pass by." The monk prevented desire from arising by applying right effort in his meditation practice. Thus, he protected his mind from defilements. If we can maintain continuous mindfulness, nothing can provoke us. We will not get angry or upset. We can be patient no matter what anyone says or does. We can remain calm and happy. An unwholesome, defiled mental state cannot arise at the same time as a moment of mindfulness. You might also find that it is quite easy to restrain negative mental states when you do not encounter difficult people or challenging situations. When everything is going smoothly, it is easy to keep your mindfulness steady. You might even congratulate yourself on staying calm and receive praise for your self-restraint and patience from family, friends, and colleagues. But when things don't go as planned, your patience and mindfulness may start to crumble. A story told by the Buddha illustrates how this can happen so easily. There was once a wealthy woman who had a very capable and obedient servant. The servant always woke up early and started work before anyone else in the house woke up. She worked all day until late at night. Every night she slept only a few hours. She often heard the neighbors praise her mistress. They said, "This lady is very kind to her servants. She is very patient. We have never seen her get angry. We don't know how she became such a wonderful person." The servant thought, "These people praise my mistress so much. They don't know how hard I have worked to maintain this house. I must test to see how kind and patient my mistress really is." The next day, the servant woke up later than usual. When the mistress woke up and found the servant still sleeping, she scolded her, "You wretched girl, you sleep until the sun is up? Get up and start working immediately." The servant got up, apologized, and began working. The next day, the servant deliberately woke up later than the day before. The mistress became angry. She scolded the servant, used harsh words, and threatened to beat her if she woke up late again. On the third day, the servant still woke up late. The mistress became so angry that she took a broom and beat the servant until her head bled. The servant ran out of the house with her bleeding head and cried out loudly, "Oh, everyone, look! My mistress beat me because I woke up a little late today. Last night I had to work until midnight, so I had a headache and woke up a little late today." The neighbors, who had praised the mistress for her patience and kindness, quickly changed their opinions. You might have also experienced a sudden change like this after a long holiday or when you just returned from a meditation retreat. During that time, anger, irritation, jealousy, or fear seemed to be dormant, so you felt very peaceful and happy. But as soon as you got home, you received a curt message on the phone or a fine for forgetting to pay insurance, or someone stepped on your foot. Immediately, anger flared up and the peace of mind vanished. Then you wonder, how can I maintain the feeling of being on vacation or meditating in daily life? The answer is to always be mindful. We need to remember that it is not others or external circumstances that cause us distress, but our past karma. Besides striving to always maintain mindfulness, training to recognize the flaws of psychological habits can also help prevent negative reactions from arising. For example, you go to buy a pair of gloves in an upscale store and the salesperson is rude. Based on past experience, you know that you will get angry if the salesperson is rude. So you make an effort to keep strong mindfulness, dispelling any arising thoughts of anger. You reason with yourself, thinking, well, this salesperson is also human. Maybe he didn't sleep well last night, or he has worries about money or some family issues. Maybe he feels uneasy about people of different skin colors or nationalities, or he is not feeling well today. That could be the reason he is impatient with customers. This approach may sound simple, but it is not easy to practice. Our minds are not trained to prevent negative thought habits. Getting angry is easy, criticizing others is easy, worrying about the future is easy, and desiring material things is easy. These mental habits are like junk food. Once we start opening a bag of chips to eat, it is hard to stop halfway. Restraining negative thoughts from arising is also hard. Once we are hooked, it is hard to let go. As the Buddha taught, good people find it easy to do good. Bad people find it hard to do good. Bad people find it easy to do evil. Good people find it hard to do evil. It is easy to do things that harm oneself. It is hard to do things that benefit oneself. However, we need to clearly understand that prevention is always better than cure. Mindfulness coupled with right effort can prevent negative thoughts and actions from arising in the future. Guarding against bad habits in body, speech, and mind is not difficult if we can train ourselves to be mindful. However, if you have tried your best and still cannot prevent unwholesome thoughts and actions, do not be disappointed or discouraged. It does not mean that you are a bad person. It just means that you need more practice. Rejoice in the awareness that we always have a helper by our side, the effort to overcome negative mental states. Overcoming negative mental states. Before attaining full enlightenment, we cannot choose which thoughts will arise, so there is no need to feel ashamed or react against what has happened. However, we can choose which thoughts to allow to develop. Positive and wholesome thoughts support the mind and need to be cultivated. Negative and unwholesome thoughts, such as the 5 hindrances, nivaranas, and the 10 fetters, samyojanas, only harm the mind. They need to be attacked and subdued immediately with right effort. That is the Buddha's advice. Overcoming hindrances. How we respond to a hindrance depends on the degree of our attachment. When a hindrance first arises, it is weak. It begins as an isolated negative mental moment, then gradually grows. The earlier we become aware of this flow, the easier it is to stop it. Whenever a hindrance is present, we cannot progress in mindfulness or meditation. The first step is very simple. When a hindrance arises, we just need to be aware of its presence. For example, we recognize that the mind is experiencing desire, anger, or doubt, or that our mind is falling into a state of restlessness, agitation, or depression. At the initial stage, these hindrances are very weak, so the method to subdue them is also gentle. We only need to recognize their presence. By merely being aware, the nascent hindrance will fade away, allowing us to recognize its absence and how this absence enables wholesome states like compassion, loving kindness, and wisdom to arise. If a hindrance has developed beyond the initial stage, stronger measures are required. First, observe the hindrance with complete mindfulness. Focus all attention on it. Recognize the effect of that hindrance on the body and mind, knowing how it hinders our spiritual development. Recognize its impermanent nature. The impermanence of circumstances, forms, tastes, feelings, and many other conditions has caused this hindrance to arise. Reflect on the harm we may bring to ourselves if we indulge in this unwholesome state, and the greater danger if we act according to its control. Now reason with yourself. Remind yourself that everything is impermanent, and the circumstances that caused this hindrance or the mental state itself will certainly not last. For example, if someone said something that made you angry, think about the problems you face in life, worries about money, health, concerns about work or family. Perhaps that person is also dealing with similar issues. We really cannot know what is going on in someone else's mind. More accurately, we don't even know what is going on in our own mind at any moment. Our mental state depends on many conditions. In fact, whatever happens depends on many factors. Reflecting in this way can make the negative mental state pass. For example, one morning you wake up feeling unhappy. You don't know why you feel irritated, depressed, tense, or grumpy. But if you think back, you might remember that the night before you ate spicy food or watched TV for hours before bed. But these are not the reasons you feel irritated this morning. They are the results of other causes. Perhaps the day before you argued with your spouse, were dissatisfied with your children, or worried about something, causing you to watch TV longer or eat more. Then you recall that you argued with your spouse because you were upset with a colleague at work, and that irritation was itself the result of other causes and conditions. In short, Everything we experience has causes and circumstances behind it, more than we can guess or know. All the related conditions overlap. There is no single reason that causes anything. Therefore, there is no need to burden the mind by blaming yourself or others. Moreover, we should remember that, fortunately, all circumstances and mental states change. Nothing lasts forever. When in a state of despair or extreme happiness, we may think nothing will change. However, if we think deeply, we can see that this belief is wrong. People change, circumstances change, we change. Nothing is unchanging. Therefore, in time, even depression or anger will pass. Our feelings about an unpleasant person or situation will change. Our attitudes and those of others will change. Recognizing this, we feel more relaxed and our negative thoughts begin to pass. The hardest type of negative thought to subdue is the one we are not aware of until its roots have deeply embedded in the mind. These delusions obscure the mind and hinder its development. You may recognize their presence when you sit in meditation, train in mindfulness, or practice concentration. When delusions constantly arise in the mind, you cannot focus on the breath. In such cases, we need to make stronger efforts. This can be an opportunity to develop insight by observing these delusions. Temporarily, set aside the intention to focus on meditation or observe the arising, growth, and cessation of bodily and mental states, and instead, thoroughly observe what is happening. The method to use for this observation is outlined in the second step in the mindfulness section of Right Effort. However, if you prefer to continue with the planned practice, there are several methods you can use. They are listed below in order of intensity of effort. If one method fails, try the next. Do not follow the delusion. Redirect the mind to something else. Replace the hindrance with its counterforce. Reflect on the truth that all hindrances arise from many causes and conditions, and they always change. Grit your teeth and press your tongue against the roof of your mouth, using all your strength to subdue the hindrance. For example, you remain angry after arguing with a friend. Reflecting on the anger hindrance is ineffective. Reasoning with yourself also fails. You have tried not to follow the hindrance. As the Buddha taught, everything arises in the mind when you pay attention to it. When you do not pay attention to any thought, it will pass. However, if this method also fails to help you subdue your anger while meditating, the argument replays in your head, making you angrier and unable to calm the mind. What can you do in this case? You can try to redirect your mind to something completely different. For example, to the useful tasks you plan to do tomorrow. If that fails, direct your mind to the opposite feeling of anger, which is loving kindness. Think of the close feelings you and your friend have shared. Let these good memories fill your mind. Then try to direct thoughts of loving kindness to that friend. If this seems too difficult, direct loving kindness to your children or a respected teacher. When the heart is full of loving kindness, there is no room for anger. However, if the anger still does not pass, observe it thoroughly. Recognize its changes, arising, growing, decaying, presence, and disappearance. Think of the harm you are doing to your mind and spiritual progress by continuing to harbor this negative state. If all else fails, you must use all your strength to destroy the hindrance, as the Buddha said, like a strong person subduing a weaker one. In summary, never let the hindrances win. You might think that gritting your teeth and straining to eradicate a negative mental state seems too harsh, too different from the teachings you have heard. You might also think this method seems inappropriate for the gentle nature of Buddhism. But this strong effort is entirely in line with the Buddha's teachings. He always taught us to be diligent. Right effort is the energy needed to help us complete the steps on the path to happiness. With right effort, we are careful to avoid unwholesome thoughts, speech, and actions. With right effort, we overcome anxiety, tension, fear, and resentment. With right effort, we practice mindfulness to cultivate wonderful qualities within us that we may never have known. Awaken those wonderful qualities and make them manifest in the mind. With right effort, maintain and not neglect them, always practice them. As the Buddha declared, even if my blood dries up, even if my flesh decays, even if my body becomes a dry skeleton, I will not get up from this meditation seat without attaining enlightenment. From the moment of realization until his passing, The Buddha always reminded us to be as diligent as that in our spiritual effort. Contrary to these teachings, sometimes people say that spiritual development only requires effortless effort. I regret to disappoint you, but there is no effort without effort. Effort must be balanced and moderate. Too much effort, or effort in the wrong place, can make the mind more tense and lead to a shift into unwholesome states. However, if we are lax in effort, we become discouraged, tired, or lose interest. Then we must make strong efforts to balance effort again with other wholesome states. The truth is, we can never achieve anything significant without effort. All great inventions required effort. The electric light bulb, cars, and computers could not exist if people only rested and relaxed. Inventors had to make great efforts in their research and exploration. If you want to undertake a great vow, like practicing meditation, you must have a strong desire to make great efforts to achieve your goal, as well as high self-discipline if necessary. A story about the Buddha can clarify this point. A horse trainer asked the Buddha, "Lord, how do you train your disciples?" The Buddha asked him in return, "How do you train horses?" The trainer replied, "I apply gentle methods. If they don't work, I use harsher methods. If that also fails, I kill the horses for meat." The Buddha responded, "I do the same. I use a gentle method. If it doesn't work, I also use a harsher method. If I cannot train them with harsh methods, I kill them." At that point, the horse trainer said, "Lord, you often teach non-violence. How can you kill?" The Buddha then explained his method of killing. He kills a faulty person by ignoring or completely disregarding that person, eventually expelling them from the monastic community. There is a famous event in the scriptures where the Buddha used this method. The Buddha had an attendant named Channa. He was the charioteer in the palace and had played with the Buddha as children. He was the one who drove the chariot that took Prince Siddhartha out of the city to live the life of an ascetic. When he grew older, he also became a monk. Because of his role in the Buddha's life, Channa considered all of the Buddha's achievements to be his own and became very arrogant. After ordaining, he often showed disrespect towards the Sangha. For example, when elder monks visited, he did not follow the protocol of standing to greet them, offering them seats, or providing water for washing their faces and feet. The Buddha rebuked Channa for his arrogance. He advised, "You must respect these monks." But Channa never followed the Buddha's advice. Finally, as the Buddha was about to pass away, the Venerable Ananda asked how he should deal with Channa. The Buddha instructed the Sangha to disregard Channa, and Ananda was tasked with announcing this to the Sangha. When the Buddha passed away, Channa was so shocked and pained that he began to think, "All my fame, power, and courage were based on the Buddha. Now that he is gone, I have no one to protect me. Now the whole world is empty. I have insulted many monks, and they are no longer my friends." When Ananda announced Channa's expulsion, Channa was shocked a second time and fainted. When he awoke, he became very humble. The Buddha knew that Channa would react this way. Channa practiced meditation diligently and was very obedient to the Sangha. Gradually, he became enlightened. Sometimes harsh methods are necessary. Sometimes harshness yields results. We can also use this method to deal with the hindrances, nivaranas. Start with a gentle method, but also be ready to use a harsher one if necessary. For example, when tempted to buy a beautiful warm coat, even though your closet is already full of warm coats, control your mind using the methods we have learned. Do not follow the desire. Redirect your mind to something else. Replace the desire with equanimity. Reflect with mindfulness on the impermanence of the coat and all other material things. If your mind still insists on the coat, you need to be stricter with yourself. Remind yourself that if you give in now, you won't get a new coat this winter, or even this year. The final solution is to threaten that you will only buy second-hand coats for the next 5 years. Then actually carry out the threat. Gradually, the mind will be trained to let go. In special cases, we must apply really strict measures. Sometimes when we sit in meditation, the mind is completely chaotic. Perhaps something happened before the session, like a day of excitement or worry. The mind is fiercely agitated with a flood of images and emotions, so that you struggle to cope with one negative thought before another follows. You might be experiencing what I have heard meditators call an attack of multiple hindrances. This is when several hindrances arise together, one after another, to dominate the mind. If we allow the mind to run wild like this, it will become a hard habit to break. It is better to muster all our inner strength to control the mind. In this case, if all usual methods fail, there is another method, counting breaths. This is a way to keep the mind focused on one object. First, count the breaths from 1 to 10, then back from 10 to 1. Next, count from 1 to 9, then back from 9 to 1. Continue counting to 8, 7, and so on, until you reach from 1 to 2 and 2 to 1. The challenge is if the mind loses concentration and counts incorrectly even once, you must start over. Continue this method until you can complete the entire count without a moment of distraction. Then you can return to your normal meditation practice. This challenges the mind. Starting over with each lapse tires the mind of wandering, teaching it restraint. Although this method is quite stringent, for some people, their mind is too agitated to concentrate on counting. In that case, take the very agitation and restlessness as the meditation object. Observe these restless states of mind. Overcoming the fetters. Using the methods described above, we can train ourselves to recognize the fetters as they arise and take measures to subdue them. With focused mindfulness and proactive measures, the fetters troubling your mind, desire, anger, doubt, restlessness, will gradually weaken and fade from your consciousness. Once a particular fetter has passed, it may not reappear for some time, freeing the mind from that fetter. However, depending on your nature and living conditions, another fetter may emerge. When we observe the cycle of fetters, arising, cessation, and reappearance in different forms, we begin to recognize how powerful they are, binding us tightly to suffering and misery. No matter how often you temporarily subdue these fetters, they continue to exist within you, always ready to ensnare and trap you. It's as if you carry a prison within you. When mindfulness has been developed, we will see that these negative mental states, like desire, anger, and ignorance, not only distort our perception, but also make every aspect of life more painful and difficult. The mind constantly returns to the ingrained negative patterns, making us feel trapped, bound into the endless cycle of samsara, rebirth. The truth is, mindfulness can only help us subdue these fetters temporarily. Only when we reach higher levels on the path can we destroy them completely. Through 4 stages. How do you do this? You let them go through 5 applications of effort, known as suppression, replacement, destruction, fading away, and liberation. Suppression means pushing all unwholesome mental states to the background, keeping them at bay with mindfulness or concentration. Whenever we can maintain mindfulness or go deep into meditation, the fetters lie dormant. When we develop the habit of suppressing these fetters, they weaken. They no longer cause as many problems and have less influence on our thought processes. The hindrances, nivaranas, also calm down a bit, creating more opportunities for insight to arise, and when insight has arisen, we have a chance to destroy some fetters. Replacement is the effort to counteract an unwholesome state by cultivating its opposite. We replace anger with loving kindness. The belief that things are permanent is replaced by contemplating impermanence. You counteract the instinctive belief in a self by observing the ever-changing factors that constitute your body and mind. When suppression and replacement have been well developed, we can subdue some weakened fetters. Destruction is the moment when any fetter must yield, like a tree struck by lightning. Fading away refers to the disappearance of the fetters immediately after they are destroyed. Liberation refers to the relief of the mind following the destruction of any group of fetters. The most significant liberation occurs at the first stage of the 4 stages of enlightenment, when we transition from ordinary life to partial enlightenment. Suppose you have targeted the first 3 fetters, self-identity, you, doubt, and attachment to rites and rituals, and have deeply contemplated their opposites. While meditating, you focus on the breath with strong concentration, allowing insight to arise. Your observation of the impermanence, suffering, and non-self nature of the breath enables you, in a moment of deep realization, to internalize that all phenomena share these 3 characteristics. Clearly seeing impermanence in everything, you intuitively realize that there cannot be a permanent, unchanging entity called self or soul. Thus, you break the first fetter. You also understand that there must be enlightened beings who have realized all this by practicing the path, and that this path will definitely help you uproot all defilements. This eradicates the second fetter, doubt. Now you know that nothing can liberate your mind except cultivating wisdom through the path of morality, concentration, and wisdom. Knowing this, you no longer believe that rituals alone, attachment to rites and rituals, have the power to save you, which means you have shed the third fetter. Once these three fetters have been subdued, you have reached the first stage of enlightenment. Now, there is no possibility of regressing to your former state. You no longer doubt your ability to achieve enlightenment or worry about how to attain liberation. You are assured of reaching your goal. You become a stream enterer, as the pull of the spiritual current will carry you to enlightenment, like a branch caught in the flow of a river. From this point on, the mind becomes unusually elated, feeling that no matter how difficult life may seem outwardly, everything inside is peaceful. You know with certainty that all things are impermanent, bringing comfort to your heart. You can no longer commit any serious, unwholesome actions because you understand the law of cause and effect. With such an ethical attitude, you have nothing to regret, freeing you from that burden. For example, if you tell a small lie, you will not rest until you admit it. You may still experience bursts of anger, suffering, or craving, but these situations cannot overwhelm you as before, and they will pass quickly. You clearly know the path to follow and are filled with confidence in your practice. Generally, you become more confident, less egoistic, kinder, more generous, better at meditation, and more capable in whatever you do. Colleagues and friends will notice these changes, seeing you become gentler, more open, and more relaxed. Your bright eyes will open the hearts of others, and they will begin to ask about the source of your serenity. To illustrate the importance of attaining the stream entry stage, the Buddha scooped up a small handful of sand and said, "Monks, which is greater, the amount of sand in my hand or the amount of sand in the entire world?" Naturally, the monks replied that the sand in the world was much greater than the sand in the Buddha's hand. Then the Buddha declared, "Similarly, monks, the amount of defilement and impurity that a person who has attained stream entry can destroy is as great as the sand in the world, and the impurities remaining for a stream enterer to destroy are as few as the sand in my hand." For this reason, the Buddha said, achieving stream entry is greater than becoming a master ruling all other kingdoms. It is greater than ascending to the heavens as a celestial being, greater than becoming a god. After overcoming this stage, we begin to tackle the next hindrances, the fetters of sensual desire and ill will. When we have overcome the first three fetters, we have also lightened the burden of the remaining fetters. Thus, the desire and ill will we now face are much less intense than what we experienced as ordinary beings. We guard against desire and ill will and use right effort to continue combating these two enemies. We cultivate generosity and loving kindness. We become entirely disillusioned with the clinging demands and complaints of the mind. As we deeply develop mindfulness of impermanence, clearly seeing the changing nature of all pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral experiences, we see the futility of trying to make everything conform to our desires. We gradually let go more and more. Eventually, there will come a day when coarse sensual desire and ill will have been significantly reduced. Some subtle, harder to recognize desires and ill will remain, making our personality seem unchanged, but we have actually accomplished a great deal. When you become a once returner, it means you may have to return to this world once more before achieving complete enlightenment. It is difficult to describe the purity the mind attains at this stage. All worries, duties, and sorrows are laid down forever. No humiliation or misfortune can disturb you. You have risen above all afflictions. Those around you may notice the serenity, boundless compassion, and begin to think of you as a saint. Yet, initially, you were no better than anyone else. It is a process open to everyone, a natural transformation in the mind that can be achieved by diligently following the path the Buddha has taught. Although you no longer feel regret or sorrow for your own losses, because your heart is full of compassion and not yet completely free from all attachments, you may still care excessively and grieve for the misfortunes of others. Further practice and training are needed. Any remaining coarse desires and ill will need to be swept away. When the fetters of coarse sensual desire and ill will are finally destroyed, you reach the third stage of enlightenment. The practitioner who reaches this stage is called a non-returner, never to be reborn in this world again, but may be reborn in the formless realm. Once the task of dismantling coarse desires and ill will is complete, the final group of fetters, the subtlest psychological stimuli, the last 5 fetters, must be dealt with. These mental impurities are so subtle that no ordinary being can recognize them, let alone feel the urge to destroy them. The non-returner continues to feel, for example, restlessness due to anxiety about future rebirth. However, for someone who has reached this subtle level, the remaining fetters are like specks of food on a perfectly clean white shirt. Continuing to practice, the non-returner releases any remaining subtle desires for any form of existence. They eradicate conceit, the inherent characteristic of believing in the existence of a self. Restlessness is eliminated as the final remnants of ignorance are cleared. In a moment of profound realization, all these final fetters are destroyed and there emerges a fully enlightened being, an arahant. This person can no longer perform any actions based on desire, anger, or ignorance, as all these impurities have been uprooted from the mind forever. As the Buddha repeatedly said, an arahant is someone who has laid down the burden. We might think that an arahant could fall to a lower level and be tempted by sensual pleasures or some other worldly actions. But if we remember the nature of the fetters, how they mislead our actions, and how they have been defeated, we will not have such thoughts about those who have fully awakened. An arahant knows that even thinking about indulging in sensual pleasures is unthinkable, let alone engaging in unethical actions. An arahant can never do anything wrong again. They continue to enjoy ultimate happiness and keep their mind always pure. Upon enlightenment, the practitioner will clearly see that everything they need to realize is contained in the Four Noble Truths. They are freed from any speculations, reasoning, or theories about reality, about the past, present and future, about the existence of self, and about the universe. They know what the physical body is, how it arises and ceases. They know what feeling is, how it arises and ceases. The same with perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The practitioner is completely free from all views and speculations, all tendencies to assert or perceive particular aspects of self and mind. All theories, opinions, and beliefs based on self-view have vanished. Being entirely free from all 10 fetters is the state of full enlightenment. Cultivating wholesome states. Most beings must work diligently to hope for enlightenment. Overcoming hindrances and suppressing fetters is essential. But even if our efforts to subdue them temporarily succeed, our minds can still be full of defilements. They may revert to painful, hindering states, like an airplane descending through layers of clouds. Therefore, once we have temporarily freed the mind from these unwholesome states, we must use right effort to inspire, gladden, and energize the mind to make further progress. When an unwholesome state is subdued, the mind moves to a neutral state, but it does not stay in that state for long. It is much like a car gearbox with reverse gear, forward gear, and neutral. We cannot shift directly from reverse to forward without passing through neutral. From the neutral position, we can engage either forward or reverse gear. Similarly, the mind cannot shift directly from wholesome to unwholesome or vice versa. It must pass through a neutral state between these extremes. A practitioner can use this neutral phase to cultivate wholesome states. For example, while meditating, a negative mental state arises. Mindfulness is activated, and we recognize this unwholesome state. We try to subdue it, perhaps by seeing its harm, and return to the breath. Since the breath is a neutral object, the mind maintains neutrality as we observe the breath. But soon after, when we let go of mindfulness, another defiled state arises, and the process repeats over and over again. If this continues, we will feel very exhausted. Mindfulness alerts us that we need to stop this negative process. When attentive, we can recognize the progression of mental actions. We see that instead of leaving the door open for negativity to infiltrate and control the mind, we need to take advantage of the moment when the mind is neutral to initiate a wholesome state. Then, return to the breath and relax. Take a few deep breaths, then start cultivating another positive state of mind. There are many ways to initiate positive mental states. One of the most effective methods during meditation is to reflect on any good deeds we have done in the past and the happy, pleasant state of mind those deeds brought about. For example, you might recall a time when you helped an elderly person cross the street. The old lady had heavy burdens and fast-moving traffic scared her. You didn't know her, nor did you expect any reward or even thanks. With a completely selfless mind, you stepped onto the street and carefully signaled for the cars to stop, helping her cross safely. At that moment, your mind felt light, relaxed, and joyful. Now, when you recall that event, how do you feel? Once again, you feel light, relaxed, and happy. From this, you think, this is the state of mind I need to cultivate. So you use this memory to arouse and enhance wholesome states. We can use the memory of any good deed we have done in the past, as long as we do not cling to it. These good actions brought us happiness when we performed them, and when we recall them, our minds are still filled with joy. Maybe you helped a lost child find their mother in a supermarket, or you bandaged a wounded animal on the street. Perhaps you saw two people arguing intensely over something trivial, and you helped them resolve the issue. Maybe at work, you inspired younger colleagues to follow your example, and so on. Another method is to recall with gratitude the good things others have done for us, or to reflect on the good deeds of others that we know of. Doing these things with a mind full of joy and wholesomeness, we also feel relaxed, at ease, and happy. We can also cultivate wholesome states by recalling times when we managed to subdue greed, hatred, or delusion. For example, remember a time when your son was naughty, making you feel like punishing him. But mindfulness arose in time, and you remembered that expressing anger was not appropriate. Therefore, your anger subsided, you calmed down, and your mind settled. Recall the significant change from the arising of anger to the pleasant, calm state when you restrained your anger, and reflect on how pleasant that feeling was. Remind yourself, this is the state of mind I want to cultivate. This reflection helps us relax, bringing a quiet joy to the mind. We can gather suitable circumstances to cultivate wholesome states. For example, watching your child take their first steps fills your heart with love. Store that memory in a corner of your mind. In the future, you can use that emotion as a catalyst to cultivate wholesome states. The method of mindful effort to cultivate positive mental states is not only beneficial during meditation. We can also use it while eating, walking, standing, working, or talking. We no longer have to rely on hoping that life will bring us reasons to feel happy. We must plan to use our minds to determine which actions create mental states that make our lives more pleasant. Recall past successes and failures. Discover the causes and effects of these simple mental processes. Then cultivate wholesome states in everything we do. For example, while washing dishes, we can direct loving kindness to those who will use the dishes. Before conversing, we can be mindful of the potential consequences of negative or positive speech. This will lead to a conversation with a good beginning. With a calm attitude and an effort to infuse each word with patience, love, compassion, and wisdom, our conversations will flow more smoothly and bring benefits to both ourselves and others. Anticipating potential issues by recognizing our shortcomings is part of this process. For example, if you have a hot temper and you know it, acknowledging that is also a wholesome state. Then you can cultivate loving kindness to restrain your temper from arising. When a challenging situation occurs, like an unexpected visit from a difficult boss at work, you can remind yourself of the possible good or bad outcomes of your actions. Then you resolve to remain calm and cultivate loving kindness toward that person. So when the boss says or does something unpleasant, instead of showing anger or frustration, you enjoy the pleasant state of mind you have created. Similarly, if you tend to worry, be prepared. For example, before your beloved grandchild takes their first airplane trip far from home, do whatever you have done in the past to manage anxiety and bring pleasant feelings. Then you don't have to suffer because of your grandchild's flight. Instead, you can enjoy a pleasant state of mind. This is a skill that can be developed. The more intentionally we initiate wholesome mental states, the more adaptable our minds become, and the better we understand them. We can cultivate boundless loving kindness, joyous states, deep compassion, and vast equanimity daily, moment by moment. These four immeasurable minds bring the mind to sublime, wondrous states, which are called divine abodes. Those who know how to generate them can enjoy heaven on earth anytime. Maintaining wholesome states of mind. Once a wholesome state of mind has arisen, we must strive to maintain it and not let it fade away. We know that if we allow this state to pass, our mind will revert to a neutral state and may then fall into an unwholesome state. Therefore, by all means, we must keep this positive mental state ever present. The wholesome state of this moment must be the wholesome state of the next moment and of the following hours, days, and weeks. We should strive to always maintain a positive state of mind, much like one would try to keep a special lamp from ever going out. This is not easy to achieve. How many times have you promised yourself good things? Remember those New Year's resolutions or the vows at your wedding before a spiritual teacher or friends? How many hopeful wishes have you made on your birthdays? But how many of these promises have you kept? Perhaps you promised yourself, I will never touch a cigarette again, never drink another glass of alcohol, never lie, speak harshly, or insult anyone. I will never gamble again, never steal, never kill any living creature. Or after a fruitful meditation retreat, you might have thought, this retreat was wonderful. I never thought meditation could be so easy. How peaceful and happy I was throughout the retreat. I must continue to meditate regularly in the future. These are all positive thoughts. But how many of these promises do you continue to keep each day? These thoughts arise in your mind like bubbles in a soda glass. After a few hours, they vanish. You lose your enthusiasm and revert to your old habits. To maintain the initial effort, you must develop strong mindfulness. Remember that nothing significant can be accomplished perfectly in just one attempt. We must repeat a positive thought or action until it becomes a habit. We admire the skills of Olympic athletes, but they did not perfect these skills in just a few practices. How many times did we fall when learning to ride a bicycle? Perfecting the mind is the same. We must practice diligently. Whenever our effort wanes, think of times when we persevered until we achieved our goal. Of course, there are things we can do to support the practice of right effort. We can associate with wise friends and avoid foolish people. We can live in suitable places, read uplifting books, and maintain contact with spiritual communities. We can also practice mindfulness diligently. These actions help sustain wholesome states. Let me tell you a story about a monk who made a great vow and immense effort. In ancient India, there was an elderly monk who was a great master. A young monk had committed an error and did not fulfill his duties. Therefore, the great master punished him by asking him to go on alms rounds at a particular household to create a good relationship with that family. The couple had just had a baby whom astrologers predicted would become a great Buddhist leader. The householder was known for being stingy and often displayed a hostile attitude towards alms seekers. The first time the young monk appeared, the householder was very annoyed. He ordered his wife, children, and servants not to give the monk anything, and not to speak to or even look at him. The young monk returned to the temple without receiving any alms from that house. The second time the monk returned to that family, the situation was the same. No one offered him anything. No one spoke to or even looked at him, but the young monk did not lose heart. Day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year for 7 long years, the young monk kept returning to that house. Eventually, the householder hired a new servant who knew nothing about the rule against giving alms to the monk. One day in the 7th year, when the young monk arrived at the house, the new servant said to him, "Go away. We have nothing to offer you." The young monk was very pleased because someone had finally acknowledged his presence. On his way back to the temple, he passed by the householder who was riding home on his horse. Proudly, the householder asked, "Hey, did you get anything from my house today?" "Yes, thank you," the monk replied. "Today I received something." The stingy householder was furious. He hurried home, jumped off his horse, ran into the house and shouted, "Who gave something to that bald-headed monk? Did anyone give him anything?" Everyone in the house said no, but the householder was not satisfied. He questioned each person. When it was the new servant's turn, he asked her, "Did you give that man anything?" "No, sir," she replied. "Did you speak to him?" "Yes, I did." "What did you say to him?" "I told him, 'Go away. We have nothing to offer you.'" The stingy man thought the monk had deceived him. This thought made him even angrier. He said, "Tell that deceiver to come here tomorrow, and I will reprimand him for lying to me." The next day, the young monk appeared at the house as usual. The stingy householder went out and angrily said to him, "Yesterday you said you received something from my house. I questioned everyone. I know no one gave you anything. You lied to me. Tell me, what did you receive?" "Sir, for 7 years I have come to your beautiful house every day without receiving anything. But yesterday a kind woman came out and said, 'Go away, we have nothing to offer you.' That's what I received from your house." The stingy man felt deeply ashamed. At that moment, he felt a surge of compassion and generosity. He thought, "This monk must be a saint. He is grateful even for being refused by my servant. How grateful would he be if he received some food from my house?" The householder immediately changed his rule and told everyone in his family to offer food to the monk. From then on, the young monk continued to receive alms from that family. His determination and right effort to maintain patience and positive states of mind were finally rewarded. The newborn child in that family later became an arahant and one of the most important Buddhist leaders of his time. You might wonder why we need to put so much effort into practice in dealing with life when everything is impermanent, and even the highest mental states will eventually pass away. Of course, you are right. Everything is impermanent. Moreover, there is no permanent self to experience everything. However, suffering and happiness still exist. If you touch a bee and get stung, you don't think, "I am in pain." There is simply an ouch. Even in that moment, without a sense of self, the pain still exists. Some people find it hard to understand the doctrine of non-self. They often think that for suffering to occur, there must be someone to suffer. However, this understanding is mistaken. As long as there are hindrances in the body and mind, suffering cannot be avoided until enlightenment is attained. There is a saying, "Only suffering arises, suffering persists, and suffering ceases." There is nothing beyond suffering, and nothing beyond the cessation of suffering. Another wrong view is thinking that because there is no one to feel suffering, suffering does not matter. The truth is that whether or not a self exists, we still suffer. Does anyone like suffering? Is it the purpose of life? Whether or not there is a self, you still do not want to suffer. Therefore, whether you suffer or not is a very important issue. It is precisely suffering that motivated the Buddha, after attaining enlightenment, to spend the rest of his life teaching others the way out of suffering. With boundless compassion, the Buddha showed us how to train the mind to be free from suffering. It is true that the highest, purest, and most refined mental states will eventually pass away. That is why we must use the wholesome mind states we have cultivated while they are present. Wholesome mind states are the necessary means to uproot suffering, and maintaining these wholesome states brings longer-lasting benefits than any temporary joy or relief. Wholesome, clear states of mind are the foundation for developing insight into impermanence, so we can uproot greed and ignorance once and for all. Comprehensive insight, using right effort to pull the mind away from unwholesome states and cultivate wholesome states, is a crucial part of the Noble Eightfold Path, no less important than mindfulness. However, few people pay attention to this. They often forget the comprehensive view and latch on to a few appealing details in Buddhism. Such people only understand a portion of the path. They pick up a few ideas they hear and cling to them, sometimes excessively, leading to unskillful practices that harm themselves. Instead of becoming happier, they suffer more. I know a young woman who was aware of the desire hidden in all her actions, especially in eating. Instead of becoming mindful, she tried to suppress her emotions. At meals, she restrained herself from feeling greedy. She also tried to eat less than her needs and compensated with protein drinks. This led to developing a neurotic allergy and becoming depressed. Fortunately, a good friend reminded her to take a holistic view and cultivate positive states of mind. The friend suggested ways to escape depression: reading, going on outings, doing good deeds, or keeping busy with work. But she reacted vehemently, saying, I don't want to escape reality. Doing what is necessary to escape the grip of unwholesome states is not escaping reality. It is avoiding greater pain. If you ultimately create more trouble and suffering, what meaning does all your effort to follow the Buddha's path have? You must constantly reflect on your actions and their consequences. You must continually ask yourself, what am I cultivating right now? Once, the Buddha's aunt, Bhikkhuni Mahapajapati Gotami, asked the Buddha for short advice to guide her practice. The Buddha advised her to do whatever she knew from personal experience, common sense, and her own virtues. The Buddha taught that the actions should lead to non-craving, non-attachment, letting go of the causes of suffering, not accumulating, contentment, not desiring much, tranquility, not dissatisfaction, solitude and peace, not gatherings and socializing, diligence, not laziness, being easy to support, not demanding or choosy. The above is a useful guide to ensure our efforts align with the overall teachings. Here is another principle we can use to evaluate our efforts. As the Buddha declared, the essential teachings of all Buddhas are always do good, avoid evil, and purify the mind. Mindfulness of right effort. When the mind is polluted by unwholesome states, meditation is very difficult. Some practitioners, when sitting in meditation, cannot keep still. They fidget, cough, scratch, shift, look at other meditators, or frequently change their sitting posture. Others often yawn and feel unable to stay awake. Those prone to anger may feel discontented and complain in their minds while trying to meditate. Others may be overwhelmed by lust or doubt. Through years of practice, meditators have developed methods regarded as special skills to overcome the obstacles hindering the practice of mindfulness meditation. When lust troubles the mind, dissect the object of desire in your mind. For example, if you crave a piece of chocolate cake, remind yourself that it is made up of many elements and will decay. After eating, it becomes waste. Keep contemplating these things until your craving subsides. This method is also effective if the object of your desire is a person. Imagine the components of the body: bones, intestines, other organs, blood, and other fluids. Keep contemplating these or try to visualize that person as a skeleton until your desire fades. But if this method increases your desire, stop immediately and focus on your breath. When anger arises, apply the antidotes we discussed, such as being aware of your anger, recognizing the impermanent nature of all feelings, contemplating the benefits of patience, reframing your perspective, and cultivating loving kindness. When lethargy or sleepiness arises, imagine a bright light. If unsuccessful, try the following methods. Tug your ears, open your eyes wide, roll your eyes for a few seconds, then close them again. Breathe deeply and hold your breath as long as possible, then exhale slowly. If necessary, repeat this until your heartbeat increases, and you may sweat. Do not close your eyes tightly. Stand up and practice standing meditation or walking meditation. Wash your face with cold water. If nothing works, go to sleep. When restlessness or worry arises, contemplate tranquility, peace, or calm. Bring your mind back to the breath and stay there. Take deep breaths and feel the breath in your nose into your body. Take another breath. Direct your attention to your buttocks or the soles of your feet and feel the weight of your body. When doubt arises, contemplate the Buddha's enlightenment, the timelessness of the Dharma, and the attainment of enlightenment by the Buddha's disciples. If you are caught up in a particular thought, let go of that futile activity and contemplate some aspect of the Buddhist teachings. Focus on what you know is true about impermanence, suffering, and the inability to control anything. Pay attention to the present moment. When the desire has passed, you feel like you have repaid a debt. When anger has subsided, you feel like you have recovered from an illness. When drowsiness is gone, you feel liberated from prison. When restlessness has been quelled, you feel freed from slavery. And when doubt is no longer present, you feel as if you have reached a safe, certain place, no longer lost in a desert. You not only feel happy the moment the unwholesome state disappears, but also later when you think about its absence. When you recall how much suffering the hindrances and defilements caused you in the past, you will feel great joy knowing they no longer trouble you. Your mind is relaxed and pure. You sought this state of mind. Now you have attained it, and you are very happy. When the unwholesome states have faded, the mind is ready to cultivate positive thoughts. When wholesome states arise during meditation, observe them mindfully without clinging to them. These wholesome states need to be cultivated and nurtured in meditation, including loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, empathy, patience, gentleness, tolerance, and service to all beings. When these wholesome states pass, strive to cultivate them again and remember why they first appeared. The roots of all wholesome states are within our minds. They are often just overshadowed by negative circumstances. Using right effort to prevent, subdue unwholesome states, and cultivate, maintain wholesome states is like climbing a mountain. Before beginning the journey, we must be careful to avoid problems along the way. We must ensure that our body and mind are fit for the task. We need to carry some medicine in case we fall ill suddenly. We must wear appropriate shoes, carry ropes, sticks, food, water, and suitable clothing. These preparations are like right effort to prevent negative states from arising. Despite such careful preparations, problems will still occur. When hungry or thirsty, we stop to eat and drink. When needing to use the bathroom, we do so. When tired, we rest. When feverish, we take the medicine we carried. These actions are like subduing unwholesome states when they arise. We maintain our energy by resting, eating moderately, drinking plenty of water, and avoiding overexertion. These positive activities are like cultivating wholesome states. After many difficulties, we finally reach the summit, feeling truly liberated, joyful, and satisfied. We rejoice because we have achieved our goal through much effort. We might say, "I am so glad it's all over," or "I am so happy I overcame all obstacles." Similarly, when you cultivate wholesome states and maintain them, you rejoice because your battle is over, and you will never have to fight with unwholesome states again. Right effort can bring such joy. When we strive for happiness, it is already present. Remember your goal and never slacken your effort until you achieve absolute happiness. Remind yourself, happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. Feeders on joy we shall be, like the radiant gods. Summary of right effort. Right effort is crucial for spiritual development, though often overlooked. Right effort involves 4 aspects, 4 right exertions: preventing the arising of unwholesome states, overcoming unwholesome states that have arisen, cultivating wholesome states, and maintaining wholesome states. Fetters are deeply ingrained, unwholesome tendencies caused by craving, causing suffering in those afflicted by them. The 10 fetters are self-view, doubt, attachment to rites and rituals, sensual desire, ill will, desire for material existence, desire for immaterial existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. Hindrances are coarse manifestations of the fetters, needing right effort to restrain and subdue them. The 5 hindrances are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Methods to overcome a hindrance are not attending to it, directing attention elsewhere, replacing the hindrance with its opposite quality, rationalizing, and if all else fails, using all one's strength to destroy it. We can only suppress fetters if we cannot destroy them. Fetters can be weakened through mindfulness and concentration. Developing opposite qualities also weakens them greatly. When the fetters are finally broken, enlightenment is achieved. Maintain mindfulness to prevent unwholesome states from arising. Mindfulness is developed through ethical conduct, mindfulness practice, discernment, patience, and effort. To overcome arisen unwholesome states, merely recognize them. If unwholesome states are not quickly recognized, they gain strength. Then, drop everything to focus entirely on them. Contemplate the harm they can cause and the impermanence of any conditions that have brought them about, or replace them with wholesome states. When unwholesome states have passed, cultivate wholesome states by recalling their benefits and deliberately creating thoughts of love, determination, compassion, etc. Use any method known to develop wholesome states. Do not get lost in the details of practice and forget the comprehensive view. Always ensure that your efforts truly bring more wholesome states. Adjust your lifestyle to support maintaining wholesome states, such as associating with wise friends, learning, and referencing Buddhist scriptures. Without strong mindfulness, our mind will quickly revert to old habits. Hence, we must always strive to maintain wholesome states to be happy. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who might benefit from it. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Hit the like button, follow, and turn on the notification bell. This is how you can show your support for me. Once again, thank you very much, and see you in the next videos.